What kind of a childhood does a person have to become an enigma like the Azealia Banks? Born Azealia Amanda Banks on the 31st of May in 1991, life was never easy for Azealia, and perhaps that shaped her to thrive in chaos. Growing up in Harlem NYC, she was the youngest of 3 sisters, one of them being 8 years older than her and the oldest being 13 years older. Before her life had even really started, her father died of pancreatic cancer when she was only 2 years old, an event that would traumatize her mother, worsening her already very fragile mental health and ensuring that the Banks household would be one full of chaos and unhappiness. But even before Azealia came into the world, the Banks household was never a happy one. In her own words, Azelia's father was a cokehead who eventually died from red meat, coffee, cocaine, and Courvoisier. He was abusive and also a serial cheater, going on to father several other children from several other women. Her mother would always fight for his attention, but received little of it. A heartbreaking blow for a woman who had got with her husband when she was 14 and he was 47, a 33-year age gap. And when he finally passed away in 1993, it was the last big blow for her mother, who would go on to project all her anger and frustration at her situation onto the young Azealia. Speaking on one of the only memories she has of her father, she said, "I remember us all walking from the train to the funeral home, and I had never heard my family be so quiet. We are loud people. My mother picked me up to look at him in the casket, and I remember her asking if I wanted to kiss him, and I was like, no, he has a booger in his nose." And that's my last memory of my father. Azealia's mother was so determined that she wouldn't go to school with all the dirty kids on the block, so she worked extremely long hours as a retail assistant at an art supply store, so Azealia and her sisters could attend an expensive Catholic girls' school. But it wasn't for Azealia, and when she turned up, she was the only black girl in the whole school and would often be bullied. However, she fought back and would get into fights all the time and whip people's bottoms. Ever since she was a little girl, Azelia's mum was abusive. After my dad died, my mum became really abusive, physically and verbally. Like, she would hit me and my sisters with baseball bats, bang our heads up against the walls, and she would always tell me I was ugly. I remember once she threw out all the food in the fridge just so we wouldn't have anything to eat. It was like growing up a feral child, being raised by this person who was always yelling and screaming, hitting you and dragging you around. She would tell Azealia all the time that by the time she was 18 years old, she had to be out of the house, which meant that Azealia started to dream of her escape. Stardom. I would become famous and be on Nickelodeon and have all these handlers, and then I'd never have to deal with my mother. She would beat me and abuse me, but then buy me stuff. Even as 4 years old, she loved entertaining people and would dance at block parties, learning her moves from the videos of Bow Wow, Lil Romeo, and B2K. So it was with her chaotic and abusive childhood and her natural artistic gift that Azealia first concocted her dreams of fame. But of course, there was still about 16 years to go before she got there. Because her mother was always at work, Azealia matured and became semi-independent at a very young age. She would make her own breakfast and get her own hair done, and at 8 years old, she got her own key so she could come and go freely after Catholic school. Of course, after grabbing some soda and some chips from around the corner, Azealia would use her free time after she got home to sing out loud and practice for her fame dream. And in her preteens, she started to venture further into music, scanning the Village Voice, the leading weekly counterculture newspaper, for new acts, and would then go and download her songs on AOL. She remembers falling in love with Gwen Stefani on MTV and waiting for the end credits while watching Clueless to see who was on the soundtrack. Safe to say, she has always been someone who stayed close to the alternative. At 10 years old, she gets her first lucky break when someone hands her a flyer for the Tada Musical Organization, a charity that helps young people get into musical theatre. Though it may not seem an obvious choice, this was perfect for Azealia because throughout her childhood, she had always been obsessed with musical soundtracks, such as Annie and Aladdin. Although she would get more into hip-hop later on and did listen to Hot 97 as a child, her favourite artists growing up included the Spice Girls, Destiny's Child, Aaliyah, and Barney's favourites. Tada provided the first opportunity for Azealia to see what a future in music could really be like, and later on, when she was about 14 years old, they also pushed her to audition for LaGuardia High School, often called the Fame School as it was actually used in the movie Fame, whose alumni includes Nicki Minaj, Timothée Chalamet, Robert De Niro, Jennifer Aniston, and Lord Leone. She auditioned for the drama division and didn't get in, instead being accepted as a voice major, later transferring to drama. She would later say how important LaGuardia was for her development, as it was the only place she felt free to be herself away from her mother's abuse.
When I was a kid, my mom was like nuts. And when I was in high school, I kind of started to see, like, you know, the strings of her mental health really start to unravel. And it affected me a lot because, you know, that was my only parent. And coming to LaGuardia was definitely like where I got to just let it really all hang out, because at home, like, you know, things were tough. Like you had to be tough because my mother was tough and I had to be tough, you know, and I never really got to talk to her about like a lot of the things that I was going through. LaGuardia was where I got to like sing out loud, where I got to really be like Azealia.
Even though she didn't get accepted for the drama division, at the time she still actually had a drama agent who would send her on auditions a couple times a week for TBS, Nickelodeon and Law & Order, but she never got any roles and the rejection was harsh. Still dealing with an abusive home life, Azealia's failing acting career only added to her depression. She eventually moved out of her mother's home when she was 14 to stay with her older sister who had been kicked out by their mother because she was gay. She thought that Lakimba would go to hell. She'd be like, don't have that girl in that house. Her mother thought gay stuff was evil and dismissed all men as gay. She was like, oh no, he's got a watch on his right arm. That's the gay arm. It was at her sister's house that Azealia first got into Vogue music and the ballroom scene, with which her sister was heavily involved, and at the same time Azealia also indulged in 3 new outlets that she used to deal with all her life problems: weed, boys, and rap. The first 2 came as a package. I left senior year. I went to school for my drama block and that was it. I was living with my sister at the time, so I would leave really early in the morning and I would go hook up with some dude and we'd do it all day, smoke, and then go to school, be an actress, and then go on like 2 auditions a day. Sounds pretty comfortable. After years of going to auditions and never getting a single role, Azealia finally decided to give up the acting life in her late teens as she wasn't getting the creative reward she so desperately craved. Which is good because as soon as she launched her rap career, things would start to take off. Being inspired by a boyfriend who thought he could rap, Azealia laid down her first bars when she was only 14, often writing about guns and weed and whatever, stupid stuff. Her first song was called Hoodbee, which goes, I smoke and get high like Project Pat, leave a guy in the trap like a Project Rat. And as soon as she started rapping, she already felt more rewarded than she'd ever been acting. She gets a job at Starbucks when she's 16 because, as we've already said, she was expected to get anything she wanted by herself. And when she saved a little bit of money, she paid a friend a year later $30 an hour to record 2 songs in his bedroom. Those 2 songs would turn out to be Gimme a Chance and the self-produced 17. She opens up a MySpace page on the 9th of November 2008, introduces herself, what up, so this is my first blog up on this music page of mine. I'm trying to get it together, so I'm sure no one will really take it seriously till there are a couple of things up here. I got this though. Hello all, my name is Azealia Banks, and posts her first 2 songs. After she managed to persuade a friend of hers to send the songs to Diplo, he started to talk about her in interviews, and the Azealia Banks train started. She started popping up at networking events and shows all across New York, and here is one of her first ever shows when she was still 17.
How long have you been writing these raps?
I've been writing these raps for like a couple months, dead ass. Like this, like some art project for me. Like for real. Like I do a lot. I do a whole bunch of stuff. Like I go to art school.
So you got into beats, and it's crazy for you to be 17. Like.
Notorious hip-hop tastemaker and video director Vashti Kola wrote on her blog, she's a 17-year-old MC and she spits pure fire. Dante Gonzalez, who ran conceptual parties to promote artists, said she's so versatile and so hyper-intelligent, but a teenager from Harlem. She also gets profiled by The Guardian, who prophetically wrote, least likely to still be doing this when she's 26. Lol. A year later, Azealia dropped out of school, signed a development deal with XL Records, and moved to London to start working on her debut album, which immediately fell apart. They flew me out to London, and the original idea was to have me work with Richard Russell, and I got signed to this development deal. Richard was real cool, but as soon as I didn't want to use his beats, it got real sour. He wound up calling me amateur, and the XL interns started talking about me. It just got real funny. I was like, I didn't come here for a date, I came here to cut some records. I got real turned off on the music industry and disappeared for a bit. I went into a bit of a depression. She moves back to NYC, finds out her 43-year-old boyfriend at the time was actually a married man, and decides she needs a complete change of scenery, and moves to Montreal with only $75 to her name, which would prove to be an extremely fortunate move, as in Montreal, while working as a retail assistant, she meets music manager Mike DeFreitas, who would eventually help her gain the licensing deal for the beat for 212, which she recorded in Montreal, oversee the music video, and help promote the single to radios. Sadly, her time in Montreal was cut short when her visa expired and she had to move back to New York, where she lay low for a bit selling keychains and stripping. Of her time at the strip club, Azealia has said, "Strippers make way more money than a lot of people working desk jobs. They're walking out there with $1,200 a night. Now me, with my little butt and my little A cups, it wasn't happening like that. I worked at this little strip club and it was a low point, but I wanted some fast money. I was such a chicken in the strip club, it was not my thing at all. I was just there for 2 weeks and then I quit because 212 blew up." And when the video for 212 blew up, it went viral. Gwyneth Paltrow tweeted her. Kanye West chose her as one of the 5 people he followed on Twitter. She became the new face of Alexander Wang. Karl Lagerfeld invited her to sing at his home for his birthday. 212 was included in the top 10 of both the NME 2011 Cool list and the Pitchfork 2011 Top 10 Tracks list. Speaking about the moment her long-awaited fame finally came, Azealia said,
"One day I went on the internet and like it was like, oh, like BBC Radio 1, like Nick Grimshaw was like tweeting me. And I was like, really? Like, oh my God, like for real? I thought it wasn't gonna happen. And then like it just started happening and I just kept it going. Like I went out there, I did my shows and, you know, paid my dues, especially like in that respect. Like I did a lot of shows in the UK and like in Paris, and I did Holland, and, you know, just basically paid my dues. And then I did Japan and all that other stuff, you know, and yeah.
She would eventually go on to sign a 4-album, 11 million record deal with Universal, go through a ton of controversies in only 2 years, have her deal fall apart, and eventually release her long-awaited debut album, Broke with Expensive Taste, on the 7th of November 2014 with an independent record label. Do you feel like Azealia has any chance of redeeming herself as a mainstream act? Have you been able to listen to any of her music after she ate that cat? Joking, she just cooked it. Would you be up for 5 nights at Azealia's? Let me know in the comments down below, like the video, and subscribe if you're new.
How do you feel though about constantly being scrutinized?
I don't care. Your problems with me are not my problems. Those are your problems.